All right, my name is Simone Straughter,
And my name is Sergio Alvarez.
and we did the autobiography of Malcolm X as told by Alex Haley. So this book was actually written in a series of interviews between Malcolm X and Alex Haley. They sat for weeks, or for months rather, and just talked about the life of Malcolm X. The most interesting and most intriguing thing about this book is the fact that it's Malcolm X's story told by Malcolm X. So it's not something that, somebody made up about him, or, what people thought or their opinions, but it's actually a book that was written by him. It was his story told by him. So to start off the story, his real name is Malcolm Little. Dad was actually a civil rights activist, or activist for Negro people in the Marcus Garvey movement. Mom was a lighter complected black woman. As a young child, he was conditioned to believe that his lighter complected skin made him superior to other blacks because he was lighter complected. And at a young age, he was conditioned to feel like his lighter skin made him superior. So when people made comments, or when white people made comments about him being a Negro, or if he heard the word Negro coming from white people, it was a normal for him. It didn't bother him. It wasn't until after his father was killed at a very young age, and his mother was sent to an asylum. From there, him and his brothers and sisters were all split up. And from there, he went from home to home. He was living with white people. He ended up settling with one white particular family, and by the age of 13, and he had a teacher by the name of Mr. Ostrowski. This is kind of the climax of his life, because this particular teacher asked him what did he want to be, or what did he want to do with his life. And when he told him that he wanted to be a lawyer, his teacher just told him, like, basically, you're African American, you're a Negro, so that's not a realistic goal for a Negro. You should look into being a carpenter because you're good with your hands, but being a lawyer is not a realistic goal for somebody like you, a Negro. And from that point on, it changed his perspective on white people, where as before, he was loved. He called himself a mascot to the white people. He was loved by the white people. The white people liked him. He didn't really have anything against them. But at this moment, when he saw the way his teacher treated him, or what he told him, it just changed his whole outlook towards white people. Not only that, he found out that his teacher was telling the other white kids that they can be anything they wanted, but when it came to him, he was only good enough to be a carpenter. From his experience from the white teacher, and I quote from the book, he stated, "I learned to hate every drop of that white rapist blood that was in me." So because of his experience with his teacher, he started becoming rebellious. He eventually dropped out of school and ended up going to live with his older half-sister named Ella. While living with Ella was a pretty well-off black woman. While living with Ella, he is exposed to a different crowd of black people. These black people are what he calls as uppity. They try to act white, in his words. Black people that he was criticizing for acting white or being white, he eventually found himself becoming like them. For example, like conking his hair, gaining credit. He started conking his hair to make it straight like the white man, instead of keeping his natural states hair. In the book, and I quote, "I had joined that multitude of Negro men and women in America who are brainwashed into believing that the black people are inferior and white people superior, that they will even violate and mutilate their God-created bodies to look pretty by white standards." Not only did he try to change his appearance to look more white, but he used white women as a pawn to gain status from other blacks, other black men, other black women. Malcolm's hatred towards the white man eventually caused him to become like the white man, with the hair, wanting to have the status, having the white woman. After living with Ella for some time, he ended up getting involved in a life of crime. He was stealing, bootlegging, pimping, and that ultimately led him at the age of 20 getting 10 years in prison. So while in prison, his brother Reginald, as well as some of his other brothers and sisters, would send him letters telling him to convert to the Nation of Islam. He also met a guy named Bimby, and what was intriguing about Bimby, he had a standard far beyond what Malcolm was used to seeing. So he took into consideration everything that Bimby said. Bimby told him that he should start reading, so Malcolm started educating himself. Bimby also told him about the Nation of Islam and how they believed that God, or Allah, was a man, or a black man rather, and that the devil was the white man. At this moment, he flashbacks to every white person that was a part of his life. The supremacist that killed his dad, the teacher that told him that he was only good enough to be a carpenter, the white girl who betrayed him, and the lawyer that told him that his crime was being with a white woman. It seemed that every white person in his life that he had encountered seemed to be detrimental to him. He believed that his eyes were open and the Nation of Islam was the only true religion for blacks.
After spending 7 years in prison, he was released in the spring of 1952. The first thing that Malcolm X did when he was released was meet up with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad was the prophet for the Nation of Islam, and he left Malcolm X in charge for setting up temples along the West Coast and East Coast. He quickly moves up the ranks in the Nation of Islam and further embraces the religion of Islam by changing his name from Malcolm Little to Malcolm X, X to represent the name that the white man has taken away from him. His influence in the Nation of Islam has caused it to flourish and saw an increase in the amount of black Negroes to convert and join the cause. His speeches were very controversial in the perspective that he really believed that the black man should be allowed to do what is necessary by any means necessary to defend himself. And he was commonly misunderstood to be an advocate for violence, when really all he just wanted was the black man to defend himself against wrongdoings, not necessarily be the one to insinuate the conflict, but to resolve the conflict. Malcolm X led a rally of Negro Muslims against the police, and being in full control of the crowd caused the FBI to start investigating him because they believed that was too much power for a black man. And it was not only the white man who believed Malcolm X had too much power, when the prophet Elijah Muhammad also viewed Malcolm X as a threat to the Nation of Islam and himself. Shortly after the rally, Malcolm X lost faith in the Nation of Islam because of Elijah Muhammad's infidelities. He is then reminded of the life that his father lived, because he is now living that same life, but not just from the white man, but also from the Nation of Islam. After Malcolm X publicly denounced himself from the association with the Nation of Islam, he continued to pursue African-American nationalism on his own, in which he later adopted the Sunni Muslim religion. In an attempt to find himself, he took a pilgrimage to Mecca, where his outlook in the white man as the devil changed. And I quote, "It isn't the American white man who is a racist, but it's the American political, economic, and social atmosphere that automatically nourishes a racist psychology, which brings out the lowest, most base part of human beings." When Malcolm X arrived back from his pilgrimage, his message changed from all white people being the devil to the white devil being a behavior that is only found in America. He knew that his changed perspective and his disassociation with the Nation of Islam was detrimental to his life. And I quote, "If I'm alive when this book comes out, it will be a miracle." And in the end, in February 1965, he was killed by members of the Nation of Islam, which is ironic because the Nation of Islam saved his life. The same Nation of Islam that saved his life also became his demise. And this book is a must-read and is considered one of the most influential books in the 20th century. The ironic part about Malcolm X's death is that he was not killed by the white man that he was trying to rise up against. He was killed by the black man, and specifically the Nation of Islam members who he was trying to protect and represent.
The real religion of Islam. And when I was in the Black Muslim movement, they didn't have the real religion of Islam in that movement. It was something else. And but the real religion of Islam doesn't teach anyone to judge another human being by the color of his skin. The yardstick that is used by the Muslim to measure another man is not the man's color, but the man's deeds, the man's conscious behavior, the man's intentions. And when you use that as a standard of measurement or judgment, you never go wrong. But when you just judge a man because of the color of his skin, then you're committing a crime, because that's the worst kind of judgment.